Hello, Algebra 1 students. This is 11-1 video number 2. And you need to be on page 333 in your journal. So we're going to look at an example where we talk about, or we find, range and standard deviation. You're going to probably want your calculators handy for this. So number 3 says the heights of the members of two basketball teams are shown. Find the range. So if you remember from the last video, range is where we find the highest value or the largest value, and then we find the smallest and we simply subtract them. So if you look at the heights of these basketball players, it looks to me like this is I'm going to call it the big value, and the smallest value is 48. So my range is going to be 78 minus 48, or a range of 30. Okay, so this means there are 30 inches between the smallest player and the biggest player. 30 inches, it's more than 2 feet. That's a lot. For team B, my biggest value is 70. My smallest value is 49. So my range for this data set will be 70 minus 49, which is 21. So less. Okay, now this example has us finding standard deviation. I want to remind you that these are our steps for standard deviation. So you might want to be looking back at page 331 as I go through this. I'm going to talk about them, but I might not flip back every time. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you we're going to work through part A. Part B, I'm actually going to give you the answer. This is 6.4 is the standard deviation for the team B. And then we will answer question C, where we're comparing the standard deviations from team A and team B. So in this video, we are going to find the standard deviation for team A. So again, the steps are on page 331. I am going to write number 1 here, which is going to correspond to step 1 back here. Step 1 says find the mean. And remember, we call the mean X bar. So we're going to find the mean. So I'm going to write X bar so you get used to seeing that. I'm also going to write the word mean. Now what I need to do is I need to add up all of these heights and divide by, how many heights do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my N is 10. Now, you don't have to write everything that you're adding up here. It's okay when you're doing your homework and your quizzes and your tests if you just start adding these in your calculator. You're going to want to put them in carefully. But when you get your total, which in this case, I did this already, and my total was 605, and then that's going to be, my mean will be 605 divided by 10. You're going to want to give these two numbers, because if you say, hey, Mrs. Farr, I got the wrong answer and I don't know why, I'm going to need to know what your total is here. So I don't need to see the list of all these numbers with a plus sign between them, but I do want to see the total. Go ahead and do this division, and so your mean is 60.5. Okay, so that is step 1. This is important, but we are definitely not done. Now, steps 2 through 3, we're going to do all together. So steps 2 through 3 says take each, we're going to say each height in our list, and we're going to minus the mean from it. And then we're going to square that. So we're going to do this all at the same time. And what we're also going to do is add all these together, because step 4 requires us to add them all together. So I am going to here, so this is step 1. Now I'm going to write, we're about to do step 2 and step 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each height in our list. So I'm going to write out a few of these, probably not all of them. 58, subtract our mean, which is 60.5, and we're going to square it. And then we're going to put a plus. Then we're going to go to our next height, 75, subtract the mean. Every time we're going to be subtracting 60.5, and then we're going to square it. Next one is 60 plus 60 minus 60.5, square it, plus 48 minus 60.5, square it. Now, I'm going to do this, but I want you to pause the video and write all of these out. You'll notice I wrote all of them out right here. Just so then when you go to put all this in the calculator, you have it written. It's going to be much easier to put in the calculator if you write it all out. I know it's a lot of writing. That's okay. You can do it. So once you've written all these out, then you want to very carefully put all this in your calculator. So I'm going to just use a lot of parentheses. I'm going to do it exactly like I wrote it. Parenthesis, 58 minus 60.5, right parenthesis squared, plus left parenthesis, 75 minus 60.5, right parenthesis squared, plus, and so on. And remember, if you make a mistake, use your arrow keys, go back and fix it. You should get, for the total of this, 756.5. Okay, remember, we're still not done. That was steps 2 and 3. Okay, step 4 and 5 says find the mean of the squared deviations. So we're going to find the mean of these. Well, to find the mean, we add them all up and we divide by n, which in our case I believe was 10. We already added them all up, so we're just going to divide that by 10, and that number is what we call our variance. So step 4, yeah, we can put it right here. Step 4 is going to be 756.5 divided by 10, because we have 10 numbers in our list. So our variance is going to be 75.65, and I want you to label that as your variance. Okay, we're almost done. Step 4. Step 5 is take the square root of that number. Take the square root of the variance. So step 5 is going to be the square root of 75.65. So again, put that in your calculator, and you're going to get a decimal. So the decimal is something like that. So remember, we're approximating. So I'm going to round this to the 10th, the first decimal place. So I'm going to call that 8.7. So my standard deviation is 8.7. It's a lot of work, but hopefully our list won't be this long. Okay, now it said interpret and it said interpret here. We really need to interpret for both of these. Kind of running out of room here. So I'm going to interpret for this 6.4. The interpretation will be the same. We would just use a different number. So the interpretation is, we want to figure out what we're talking about here. We're talking about heights. So I'm going to say the typical height. And then remember, we want to use the word differs from the mean. So this differs from the mean is going to be part of your interpretation every time you're asked to interpret standard deviation. Differs from the mean by 6.4 inches. Okay, so that is for team B. For team A, the interpretation would be the typical height differs from the mean by 8.7 inches. Okay, so what does this mean? It says compare the standard deviations of team A and team B. What can you conclude? So the standard deviation, I'm going to abbreviate this. SD, standard deviation of team A is greater than team B. So what does that mean? Let's say, therefore, the heights, because remember, that's what we're talking about, heights differ more from the mean on team A. Now I want to go one step further. Say I need to describe this in even simpler terms. What does this mean? The heights on team A are more spread out. So we don't have a bunch of girls that have the same height close to the mean. The heights are more spread out. So let's say and or heights are more spread out from the mean. So for example, let's say we don't know the mean of this. We didn't figure out the mean, but let's say that the mean here is, I don't know, 75 inches on team A. Because the standard deviation is bigger, the standard deviation is 8.7 for team A. So if our mean was 75, the typical height of a girl would be 8.7 inches more or less than 75. Whereas in team B, the typical girl's height would only be 6.4 inches more or less than the mean. All right, those are the high points of 11.1. So just a quick recap here. This is everything we talked about. We found mean, median, mode. We talked about outliers. We found the range. We talked about standard deviation. That is it.